Hi everyone, I just thought I'd start this video with a quick disclaimer. During this race, a driver crashes heavily and the result is 2 broken legs. For a while I've been wondering whether or not to cover races if people were at all injured in them, although on this occasion I think it's acceptable since the driver concerned made a full recovery and returned to F1. However, this accident is still featured in the video, so if seeing a crash which caused actual injuries will disturb you, then you have been warned. With that out of the way, allow me to take you back to 1997 and that famous rivalry between Michael Schumacher and Jacques Villeneuve, and the venue for this one particular showdown, Jacques' home track, the circuit Papa Villeneuve. Qualifying for the 1997 Canadian Grand Prix was close as ever, with Schumacher taking pole position by just 1/100th of a second over championship leader Villeneuve, foreshadowing Jerez's dead heat. Rubens Barrichello was an impressive third for Stewart, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen was fourth. The biggest shock in qualifying was the poor performance of Eddie Irvine, who qualified only 12th on the grid, alongside Alex Wurz, who was making his debut for Benetton. When the race got underway, Schumacher got the best start, and behind him Barrichello got a characteristically bad one and began to drop back. Seriously, it's so frustrating how often Barrichello does this. Also making a good start was Fisichella, but there was drama in the mid-pack as a front wing went flying and then off went Irvine. The car stalled and Irvine's retirement was dreadful news for Ferrari, since they'd come into this round with only a 1-point lead in the championship over Williams. A replay shows that it all started when Panis ran into the back of Hakkinen and lost his front wing, and the debris slid across the track and hit Irvine. That's so unlucky. Hakkinen was also out, having lost his rear wing, and so was Jan Magnussen, who seemingly had a separate accident off-screen. As for Panis, who had actually been one of the fastest drivers in the warm-up session, he found his way back to the pits and stuck on a new front wing. The order at the end of the first lap was Schumacher, Villeneuve, Fisichella, Alesi and Coulthard, but not for long! Look! That's Villeneuve, who spun out of the final chicane and impacted the Quebec wall on just the second lap of the race. What a shock for the driver who came into this race 3 points ahead of Schumacher in the championship, and who would undoubtedly have been the favourite to win at the circuit named after his father. Ironically, Villeneuve would crash in the same place in '99 along with several other world champions, causing the barrier there to be unofficially renamed the Wall of Champions, and he would never win his home Grand Prix. On a brighter note though, he's just been inducted into Motorsport magazine's Hall of Fame, so there's that I suppose. The drama then continued as Ukyo Katayama had a throttle issue and hit the wall hard, bringing out the safety car. In all honesty, he's lucky his throttle didn't fully stick open heading into the hairpin. That would have been a horror crash. No one pitted behind the safety car, but bizarrely Heinz-Harald Frentzen did only 1 lap after the race went green again. I presume there was some sort of a miscommunication here, as you lose so much more time pitting under green flag conditions, and this pit stop would drop him right down the field. Taking notes from Ferrari, are we guys?
Be very encouraged by this. I was speaking to them yesterday and they seemed to think that they could get to the end of the race.
I love that that wasn't a given in the 90s. How good is your car? Very good. Sometimes it doesn't even break down. Mark was of course talking about Tyrrell, who were running 8th and 9th, but here's Verstappen going for 7th. Oh, big lock-up. Does he make the corner? He makes the move, but as you can see from this replay, he clearly cuts the chicane to get past Barrichello. Did he give the place back in the end? Well, no, he did not. Before long, Barrichello was under pressure from Salo as well. That's not fair. You go where your teammate went now. Thank you. The crunch count claimed another victim on lap 15, and that's Ralf Schumacher from 5th place! Bang! Wow! Something clearly went wrong under braking, and the car slid down the barrier, and that's a big hit. That reminds me of Perez and Massa's crash in 2014. Luckily, he was perfectly alright, and impressively that put Alex Wurz up to 5th position in his first Grand Prix. Alex was a last-minute substitute brought in to replace Gerhard Berger, who was unwell, and despite a shunt in practice, he was going very well indeed. By the way, fun fact, did you know that Alex's father was a rallycross champion, much like Jenson Button's? I didn't. Here comes Salo on Barrichello, but there's still yellow flags there, Mika. There's still yellow flags you can't overtake. Come on, back off, there we go, about time. Here we go again then, and that one's much fairer. Good move from Salo, and Barrichello then had Johnny Herbert to worry about. Things were not going well for the man who started 3rd on the grid. Yoink! And it went from bad to worse for Rubens. Here he is taking a 10-second stop-go for speeding in the pit lane. Still no penalty for Verstappen though, and it's not coming. Oh dear. I've also just noticed that Rubens has some damage to his nose, which I think may have happened as the field bunched up into turn 1, so I'm going to go ahead and add that to the crunch count. I know we didn't see the contact, but it must have happened, so rules are rules, onto the count it goes. At the end of lap 28, Michael Schumacher pitted from the lead of the race, setting up for a 2-stop or 3-stop flexible strategy. By this point, Fisichella and Alesi had also pitted, so David Coulthard went through to lead the race, and in the process set the first ever sub-80 second racing lap at this circuit. Good going. As for the fight for third place, there are Alesi and Fisichella, and as you can see they actually swapped places in the pit window. Right behind them then was Johnny Herbert, who was catching and running a much lighter car having not yet pitted, and who was genuinely challenging for the podium places. Oh, that's a genuine attempt there out of the hairpin, but Ralph is always going to get the traction there. Into the pits we go instead. By the way, also in the pits at this point was Rubens Barrichello, who finally retired the Stewart with transmission problems. What a gutting way to end a real slap in the face of a race. Jarno Trulli's Minardi was also out with an engine failure, meaning that out of the 22 cars that started the race, only 14 were still running. This race is chaos. By the way, did that pit entry look a bit fast to you? Well, it did to the sensors, and Herbert was given a 10-second stop-go penalty, dropping him back from the top 5. A slightly cleaner entry was made by David Coulthard, who made his pit stop at the end of lap 39, having crucially run 12 whole laps longer than Schumacher. At this point in time, the race was clearly between these two drivers, and it would all come down to strategy in the end. Coulthard's stop was slightly sluggish, as his rear left tyre protested while being put on, but after some persuading, on it went and off he flew. The gap for the lead was now 10 seconds in Schumacher's favour. Skipping ahead in the race now, Michael has made his second stop and given the lead back to Coulthard. And look, that's Olivier Panis actually unlapping himself to the Ferrari, only a couple of laps after being lapped in the first place. As it turns out, Schumacher actually had a problem with his new set of tyres, and before long he was back in the pits, and whoa, that was a slide and a half. Having made 3 stops to Coulthard's 1, the ball was now well and truly in David's court. However, the story didn't end there, as McLaren decided fatefully to pit Coulthard. This was supposed to only be for safety, as he had a big enough gap to Schumacher to pit and still come out in front, although incredibly Coulthard's car refused to restart. Look at him, just sitting there doing nothing. He looks like me making these videos. Schumacher retook the lead just seconds after it seemed that he'd lost the race, and Coulthard dropped way down out of the points. However, much worse was to come for the race. On lap 52, Olivier Panis had a rear suspension failure and lost the car, grazing the inside wall before spinning across the track and into the tyre wall at a nasty angle. The car came to a stop very quickly indeed, and Olivier Panis had both of his legs broken. Olivier had actually come into this race third in the Drivers' Championship after very strong results in the first part of the season, but sadly he would be forced to miss the next 7 Grand Prix while he recovered. He would eventually return to F1, but he never again scored the same kind of results that he had pre-injury. In my opinion, this accident stalled the momentum of his career, and I think he could have achieved a lot more without it. Who knows, maybe he could have won a race or two. Maybe he could even have held on to third in the championship. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be. As for the race, it was eventually red flagged and not restarted, mostly because of the damaged barriers. Michael Schumacher was declared the winner, giving him the lead of the championship by 7 points, and extending Ferrari's lead in the Constructors' Championship to 8 points. Jean Alesi was second, and Giancarlo Fisichella came home for his very first Formula 1 podium in third. Heinz-Harald Frentzen recovered to 4th place, Johnny Herbert hung on to 5th, and 6th was Shinji Nakano, who we barely saw any of in the race. David Coulthard eventually got his car restarted and came home 7th, surely realising that if he just stayed out he'd have won the whole thing. After him came Pedro Diniz, Damon Hill and Gianni Morbidelli, and that's it. Only 10 cars finished, even though the race ended 15 laps early. It was an absolutely crazy day, and it ended on a rather sombre note. Guys, before I give this race a score, I want to let you know that I have a Dailymotion account for all the videos that get taken down from my YouTube channel by the pesky FOM bots. Due to the high levels of parody, review and education my videos contain, I believe that all of them fall under fair use, but sadly this isn't always enough. On my Dailymotion, you can find the 1996 Monaco and Portuguese Grand Prix, as well as the 2008 Japanese Grand Prix, and more. I also now have a Twitch channel, where I stream about once a week and would really like to grow my audience. The links to both of these accounts are in the description of this video. Thank you. I gave the Grand Prix a 5.7 out of 10 overall, with its strengths being its unpredictability and its utter craziness. Unfortunately, this does include 2 minus points, one for Parnas's injury and one for the race being stopped early. I'll give the Driver of the Day award for Best Driver to Shinji Nakano, who finished in a strong 6th position despite starting way down in 19th on the grid. His race actually shares a lot of similarities with the Driver of the Day from my last video, Gabriele Tarquini at the 1989 Mexican Grand Prix. In both cases, the driver came through from a lowly grid slot to take their first ever point in F1, and in both cases the cameras barely picked up on them at all. Honourable mentions go to Michael Schumacher for a strong win, Johnny Herbert for finishing 5th despite his penalty, David Coulthard who was desperately unlucky, Pedro Diniz for finishing ahead of his world champion teammate, and Alex Wirtz who was running in the points on his debut until his transmission gave up off camera. I'll give the Inouye Trophy for Worst Driver to Jacques Villeneuve, who crashed out of a race he could absolutely have won. Drive safely guys, and I'll see you next time.